Welcome to the Tech Panel.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The podcast where tech minds meet.
So welcome to the Tech Panel, where we interview founders, CEOs, and C-suite individuals about their professional journeys and use of tech. I am Matt Finnegan.
I'm Marvin.
I'm Em Glasson.
And today we have Ben Wyeth, who is the founder of Shufl.app, AI Guana NFT project, and founder of Guana Tree Planting Fund. Ben, welcome to the Tech Panel.
Hey guys, great to be here. Nice to meet you all.
So nice to meet you, Ben. To start off with, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, certainly. So I started originally as a freelance photographer. Did that for quite a while, covered a whole range of different stuff. I was based in the UK back then, so I was shooting for newspapers, magazines, Premier League soccer. Moved over to Oz about 10, 11 years ago. I was freelancing for a little while when I got here, and then kind of fairly quickly transitioned into web design and running a digital media agency. So doing a whole range of stuff there as well. So making websites, social media, marketing, branding, design, all that kind of stuff. So I had kind of this pretty broad range of like different skills, if you like. Yeah. At the same time, I was kind of, I guess, on the side, I was kind of developed this interest in like the crypto space. I had visions of becoming a, master trader and like, making a fortune that way, which I definitely didn't have the skill set for. But kind of, I had like this interest just kind of as a retail investor. And then when NFTs came along, it was kind of like this aha moment where I had like this skill set that kind of perfectly aligned with what was happening in the kind of crypto space at the time. And that led to me launching an NFT collection. And I guess the rest is kind of history. It just kind of took off and went from there, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess, can you explain what an NFT is to all our listeners?
Yeah, certainly. So an NFT stands for a non-fungible token. So essentially it means like each token represents something unique. So if we think of something like money, which is really fungible, like you don't care which dollar I give you as long as it's a dollar because they're all the same. You can swap, $1 for like 250 cents, etc. Whereas an NFT represents something, that's totally unique. And I guess one of the key kind of things that unlocked was this ability to create sort of digital scarcity. Yeah. So, in a world where, you could have thousands of copies of the same image, this technology kind of provided the unlock, which meant, okay, everyone, can right click, save the image. But this is actually like the provable token, which you can verify it was created by the artist who made it. And that kind of, you had that chain of provenance that goes back. So in a world of abundance, it kind of allowed you to create sort of scarcity.
And for anyone who's unfamiliar with the term, myself included, fungible, help us understand what that means.
So kind of, as I alluded to there, so fungible means things can be easily interchangeable. So like money is the perfect example. Like $1 is exactly the same as another dollar. If you go and get your change from, the cashier when you're buying your coffee, you're not worried about them giving you like the shiny gold dollar as opposed to the other one because they both have exactly the same value. They're completely interchangeable with each other.
I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting. Like, I feel like not everyone is familiar with this space. I guess, Ben, what inspired you to get into this space?
So, I mean, I was really interested in kind of like crypto and Web3 in general. I think there's a lot of like the kind of core ethos and philosophy behind it. Like these ideas of sort of decentralization and community ownership, and these things kind of really resonated with me personally. There was also, it was a really exciting space because it was kind of a lot of innovation. It was kind of at the forefront of pushing this new technology. So that's kind of certainly, attracted me to it, I think. I kind of lost my chain of thought there. quite rambling.
I thought I had actually lost something. I was like, wait, was there an end to that?
Yeah, no, I don't know where I'm going. Yeah.
And obviously, the NFT market has had its own fair share of controversy. What attracted to you in particular, and how did you sort of navigate the challenges that are associated with some of the problems that people have encountered really early on with the NFT space?
So, I mean, I've definitely fallen victim to them as well. It's in a lot of ways, crypto, and it's maturing, but it's still very much the Wild West in terms of this. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of gray areas in terms of like legal structures, and there's a lot of kind of shady stuff that goes on, and obviously there's a lot of money involved as well, which kind of attracts a lot of bad actors. So it's definitely some way that you kind of want to be careful and cautious. And I think there's certainly the early days, the kind of like heyday of NFTs, I guess, through 2021. When you're associated with, a lot of people would have heard of like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is probably like the most famous NFT collection that kind of broke through into like mainstream consciousness. It was it was a lot of it was very much driven by like hype and speculation. So I think that's something that on one side, as a founder, you kind of have to be aware of and understand those market dynamics, and you've got to kind of play the game to an extent, but you definitely want to be aware of it, and you don't want to get kind of caught up in this crazy like hype and sort of speculative bubble as well.
And I guess, Ben, you kind of mentioned that you started in the space as like almost a retail investor and you had an interest in it. And now obviously you've got kind of 3 businesses in this space. So I guess, could you tell a little bit about how this hobby became a business, and then a little bit about each of the, I guess, businesses as well?
Yeah. So I guess, like I said, I was kind of interested in the space. I was, a retail investor, so I had, a little bit of money, and I was playing around, trading different coins, following what was going on. And it always felt like it was this kind of, you either had to be, I guess, like a finance bro or kind of like computer science developer, neither of which I had any skills in. So it was kind of like, I was like, on the sidelines like everyone else. And then when NFTs came along, it was kind of, like this merger of like art within the technology. A lot of it was kind of like marketing and branding. And for me, it was like, this aha moment in that all those skills that I'd been developing through the early part of my career like aligned really well and gave me an opportunity to jump into the space. At the time as well, I think like late 2020, early 21, we were kind of like in that kind of COVID period as well. So everything was on lockdown. So for me, it was actually kind of started as this like COVID side project.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, cool, I could do something here. So started, found some artists to work with, came up with a concept, started putting together this collection, and really kind of put it out there without any expectation of like what was going to happen. It was kind of like, a relatively low bar or low entry, like I didn't have to invest a whole lot of money to start, gave it a try, and we were super lucky. We timed it really well, managed to find a lot of traction very quickly. And like overnight, it was like, okay, cool, right, we're onto something here. And then just dived in kind of and just grabbed on with both hands and tried to make the most of sort of riding that wave, I guess.
Interesting. And then I guess, so initially it started with this NFT project where you released a bunch of NFTs using your kind of marketing and art skills. And then I'm really interested in kind of this other element to it, which is the tree planting piece. Like, how did that come along, and can you explain a little bit of what that is?
Yeah. So when we launched, it was kind of the middle of 2021. And at that time, if you were kind of following any of the mainstream media coverage around crypto and blockchain, the narrative was very much like, this is bad for the environment. Bitcoin mining is really energy intensive. So there was a lot of kind of media stories that kind of talked about how this was a real negative for the planet. And one of the projects or blockchains that I've been following was this chain called Algorand. And they were, kind of low transaction fees, low cost, but they were also carbon negative. So they had a really low energy usage for the chain. And then what energy they did use, they actually offset through like carbon offsets and things. So it was an opportunity to kind of like counter this kind of narrative and show, yes, like Bitcoin is energy intensive, but there are actually alternative solutions. Yeah. So we just came up with a really simple messaging, which I think, looking back, having this kind of simple message made it easy for people to understand. And we just said, look, for every NFT that we create, we're going to plant one tree. And then obviously as the project kind of became more successful, that led to us kind of planting like 50,000 trees in the first few months. And then kind of over time, that's kind of like everything else has just kind of expanded. And we've now spun that out to be its own kind of separate entity. We run that as like a not-for-profit. And the way we kind of structure that is, if you're familiar with like an endowment fund, over time, we've basically created this pool of capital, which we've, from some of the NFT sales, some donations from other members of the community, some partnerships we've done with other companies. And basically we invest that back into different strategies kind of within kind of the crypto blockchain space. So through things like there's governance programs and there's like DeFi yield.
Sorry, what was that?
So basically
DeFi?
Sorry?
What did you say? What did you say? DeFi?
So DeFi. So that DeFi is a crypto term that means decentralized finance.
Okay.
So there's things like, the easy way to think about it, I guess, is like, say if I've got one type of coin and I want to swap it to a different coin, traditionally like that used to go through kind of like a centralized exchange. So, a company would run almost like a bank and you'd swap your tokens through that way. Through these different protocols that have been developed on chain, they can now happen in sort of like more decentralized ways. So they create what's called liquidity pools. So anyone can add in, you can put some of your capital in there, which is held in these pools, and then someone else can come along and they could swap between the coins. And then each time one of these swaps happen, that generates or a small fee is taken. And then that fee is distributed amongst all of the people who've provided the liquidity.
Yeah. That's super interesting, Ben. You mentioned blockchain. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about a blockchain is, kind of if you think about like a piece of software or like a website or a bank, it generally runs on like a database. So with a blockchain, it's essentially, it is a database, but rather than it being, your bank, for example, in the olden days, they'd have had a book where they write down all the transactions, they hold all of the balances and things. This database is decentralized, so it's distributed amongst the network. So all of the different participants in the network, they all hold a copy of the database. And each time a new transaction happens, it's approved by the network and added to this database. So it's kind of like this running ledger, which gets longer and longer. And anything which has been added to it can't be changed. So once it's on there, it's there forever, and anyone can go along and see it.
So it's really a transparency solution that makes it so instead of someone, an individual, like you said, like a bank, holding access to all the transactional history, once one transaction is made between this bank and the next bank, now the next bank is now carrying a piece of that blockchain. And if they were to transact with someone else, then the third bank would now carry a piece of that blockchain. So everyone can see how it started, made its way to point B, and ended in point C. And that's what you're sort of describing as decentralized. It's no longer one person holding access to all of this information behind closed doors. It's very transparent for the customer to understand what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone, you can go onto the chain and you can look up an address, you could see what the balance is, you could see any transactions. There's no, if I needed to send funds from my wallet to your wallet, I just send them to you directly. It doesn't go through there's no kind of third party getting involved. And then I guess that's kind of, like the simple explanation. But then over time, that sort of progressed. So you had Bitcoin, which is essentially like the very first generation blockchain,
Yeah.
if you like, where that was kind of all you could do. So it was simply a ledger that allowed you to transact and move kind of these kind of amounts of crypto between wallets and things. Whereas the next evolution, which came with Ethereum, that allowed a level of sort of programmer. You could program into the blockchain, like things like smart contracts, and essentially like pieces of code which would run on chain. Mm-hmm. So they'd be like little mini computer programs or something that could actually run and do specific actions in accordance with the code that was written.
I've seen some really creative things happen with, I believe it's Ethereum. So maybe to add a little bit of clarity for any person listening in, I'll bring this back to my construction experience. Let's say if you are a construction company operating in Australia and you want to purchase something from China, typically what would happen is you write up a contract and you say, I will pay you to procure these materials. But when it comes to something like procuring materials from overseas, where there's lots of middlemen in between, the last thing you want to do is just give all your money up front to that person because it could disappear. So blockchain, how it supports the process, would say at each milestone, you unlock a certain amount of payment to go into that person's bank account. So say, for example, you make the contract, they get 10%. As soon as the materials received by China delivers it to the docks, a digital system is signed that says it's now made itself to the docks, it's been validated, and now you release a segment of payments to go to that person again. And as soon as it then arrives in Australian shore, again, the blockchain can validate that it's been received, more funds get put in that person's bank account, and then when you get that, then you pay out the entirety of the contract. So blockchain is something that I've seen construction being used that protects the consumer from just giving up everything and taking on all the risk in a purchasing process. Did I get that right? That's how I understood it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying in blockchain that you kind of don't trust but verify. Mm-hmm. And I guess, with the original example, it's like, look, I'm going to do A, and once I've done that, you're going to pay me. And like part of what this unlocks is we don't need to trust each other. Mm-hmm. In fact, it means we don't actually even need to know each other, as long as, we put this into the contract. Once it's there, if it's there and it meets all the criteria of the contract, it will be executed and you will be paid.
Yeah, and I guess, Ben, on off the back of that, of blockchain, can you explain what Web3 is and what are the advantages of businesses using Web3?
Mm-hmm. So the easiest way to explain that is if you kind of think of the progression of the internet. Mm-hmm. So in the early days, the very first version, if we call it Web 1, that allowed you to basically, it was read only. So you go to a website, the pages are kind of pretty static. All you can do is really read and consume the content. Web 2, which is kind of like the more modern era, that kind of the unlock there was that it was read and write. So in terms of writing, that meant that you could, easily, the average user could create content. And that led to things like social media, where it's, user generated content. So we've gone from read only to read and write. And then blockchain, which kind of has driven this sort of Web3 idea and this new era of the internet, would be read, write, and own. So it would allow you to actually own digital assets. These can be kind of easily transferred, as we've been talking about, but also part of the design with the nature of them being decentralized is you could actually own parts of the network essentially as well.
Interesting. And because I know, looking into your background and kind of a lot of things that you believe in, you kind of see Web3 as this huge advantage for technology. And I guess I'm interested that all of these companies that have built their business on Web 2, what is some advantages potentially migrating to Web 3 for them?
So I think we're at an interesting stage with blockchain where it's kind of gone through this early phase, which was, really driven by sort of speculation and hype. And now people are starting to work out, okay, like what can we actually use this technology for that's going to have like a real world application?
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see some of those companies and products are starting to come through and actually emerge. And I don't think we've yet to see like a real breakout product, which is kind of put Web3 kind of onto the map or into the minds where, you know, everyone's using it. But it's definitely coming. So we're starting to see things like, you know, things like ticketing, for example, is a good example. So if you buy, you know, I don't know, like a Taylor Swift ticket to a concert, it's super, you know, you see a lot of the secondary market for these things to be traded amongst fans. Like if I bought tickets and I can't go and I want to sell them to someone else, how do you know the tickets are real? How do you, you know, how are you not going to get scammed? Do we need to meet in a, you know, some dodgy alleyway behind the concert stadium? And it's, you know, and it's kind of like a drug deal, right?
Yeah.
But this, you know, we're seeing examples where they could be like NFT based, for example, and then they're on chain. You can easily verify, yeah, it's the official ticket because it was created by the, you know, and then you could have a marketplace, for example, which allowed that to be transacted. So we're starting to see solutions coming through. There's a really interesting project called TravelX, which is doing this for like airline tickets at the moment. So it would unlock the ability to kind of easily trade airline tickets kind of once you bought them. There's other examples where you're seeing things like tokenized ownership of like property and real estate. So homeowners have been able to like tokenize their off of these tokens. So individual users are able to buy these, you know, like put like $50 into an investment and own a share of this house. And this is all kind of able to, you know, you can do it in sort of a trustless way. And it's all verifiable and provable on chain. So we're starting to see these things unlock, but I think there's kind of a long way to go before it becomes a lot more widespread. I mean, that's the other side of it as well, is not everything needs to be running on chain.
Yeah.
There are some things which work really well with the Web2 solution. And I think there has also been a tendency where certainly among people who are really excited about crypto, they just want to make a Web3 version of a Web2 app.
Yeah.
But like, you've also got to ask yourself, is this actually providing any benefits? Are there any advantages to this? You know, because there are trade-offs as well. Like sometimes it could be a bit slower to transact. Maybe there's, you know, a cost associated with each transaction that occurs and those type of things as well. So it's not a solution for everything, but there are definitely applications for it. I think another one we're starting to see more of is there's some people who are trying to build kind of like decentralized Web3 based like social media platforms. You know, you often hear the example of people or like creators, they're building an audience, whether it's on one specific platform, you know, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, then something happens, their account gets hacked or they post some content that the platform doesn't like and they kind of lose their account.
Yeah.
Whereas this way, you know, through a platform that was more decentralized, you'd have full control over that. And it wouldn't be able to be taken away from you so easily.
Yeah. So Ben, do you suggest that like businesses should look into Web3?
I think that, yeah, they should definitely be looking at it. I think there's a lot of, for most businesses, I think there's some really interesting learnings around like how like Web3 businesses are kind of like certainly working with communities.
Yeah.
There's a lot of community building goes on in Web3, sort of, and the idea that the community can actually own a part of the brand and be kind of more involved. And I think there's some really interesting kind of learnings that could be taken and applied to a lot of businesses. Whether you'd want to use the technology, I think that would depend more on your kind of specific use case, but there's certainly some interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
You said there hasn't really been something that's a breakout technology associated with Web 3.0. Sorry, is it called Web 3.0? I think I just got that wrong. Forgive me. But I guess my question here is there a possibility that there just maybe is a significant lack of education in the market? I mean, even from my perspective, I can read about NFTs, crypto, and these new technologies, but even if that educates me on what it is, it doesn't tell me what I can do with it. I'm I think I and myself and many other people that are listening will probably listen to this and think to themselves, great, I know a lot more now about NFTs and blockchain, but how does that actually impact my day-to-day life, right? Do you think there's a problem from that perspective in the market that's sort of hindering the adoption of the technology?
Yes and no. I think there's definitely a tendency that there's a lot of jargon and it's quite inaccessible in terms of making it, so it's easy to come along, get to grips with what's happening. But I also think the other side of it, in terms of like a breakthrough app, you wouldn't actually even know that what you're doing is being run on blockchain. I think that would all be happening almost in the background. Like, we're connecting now via like a platform that's allowing my video to talk to you. I've got no idea how this is working in the background, right? Like, we don't understand how email works or how it works and we use it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that in terms of a breakthrough app. It's got to be super easy to use and you just feel the benefits. And this is better than using the alternative platform. And that will be what leads to kind of, us seeing more widespread adoption with kind of platforms that can kind of transition.
So is it fair to assume then that this technology is not something for the average user to take advantage of? It's more of a service that's going to operate behind the scenes that just makes life safer.
In terms of, I guess, I mean, I think the average user can take advantage of it in, for doing different things. Like, if, for example, I needed to make payments, like I've got family on the other side of the world and I wanted to send them some money, it's going to be cheaper and easier for me to send them that in crypto than it is to go to the bank, pay $30 in bank charges, get a terrible exchange rate. Like, I could do it, through a crypto wallet, send it to them. I know they've received it before they've even got it. So I think there are use cases where, like that, you don't necessarily need to understand the technology in great depth to be able to find use for it. But I think in terms of it being accessible for people to come and build on and develop on, I think it's still, it poses a challenge. But then like building an app or creating a website, I think they've started to get more accessible. And we are seeing kind of like no code tools, but if you really want to go deep with it, you're still going to have to engage, professional software developers and whatnot to support that as well.
Forgive me if I poke and prod here, but I really want to sort of unpack and help the listener understand here. Even with NFTs, right? And I think this is a common challenge with Bitcoin or these other tools and technologies out there. While they hypothetically have this awesome value where I can essentially put my money into a Bitcoin and I can transmit that over to you. But from there, it sounds like, at least in my limited understanding, you still got to take that Bitcoin and find someone that values it at the same price that you invested the money into it. So for example, if I were to buy a Bitcoin for $1,000 right now, that's the cheapest Bitcoin in the world, by the way. And I wanted to sell that Bitcoin, right? It doesn't necessarily mean anyone wants to pay what you paid for it, right? Isn't that the way that it operates? There's a level of, I will potentially buy it from you, but I'm only willing to pay you X amount for it. So it's not necessarily a like for like. I have $1,000 here and I want to send some money to my mom. Hey mom, here's $1,000. There could be a potential loss there for the end user, couldn't there?
I mean, with that, I mean, I don't want to give anyone an investment advice, and I think there's always potential for a certain loss. I think with something like, a major cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or, any of the kind of, like major coins, there's a lot of liquidity and you can go and trade those very freely through, as if you were trading stocks or shares. Like the market's incredibly liquid. You could jump on, if you had Bitcoin that you wanted to sell, you could go and sell that almost instantly into a buy order through like an exchange, whether you did that through a decentralized exchange or a centralized exchange. But you could go and sort of swap in and out of that, and you could actually do that more easily than if you were buying and selling shares.
Ben, forgive me.
Sort of
I think I was using crypto as a medium to explain how you would trade an NFT, though. Is it similar for NFTs?
So NFTs would be a lot less liquid in terms of a market. So certainly with some of the most popular collections, say on like an Ethereum or Solana, the market would be more liquid. But yes, you'd post those and you'd kind of essentially add it to a marketplace for sale. You'd set the price, and then someone would need to come along and kind of want to pay the price that you'd put it at.
And how do they assign value to those, do you think? Help me understand like how it becomes valued at $1,000. If I create an NFT today and I'm saying, this is $1,000, do you want to buy it? What's the driver for someone to want to invest into it?
Well, someone else needs to think it's worth that much, or that they believe that they could speculate on it, buy it for that much, and then sell it for more. So I think that's the key. And a lot of it, the question is, we've seen certainly when you've had like these hype cycles, there's been huge run-ups in price, and then it kind of could very quickly come back down as well. So really it's kind of it's probably not how does the individual value it, but how does that market of buyers value it more broadly.
And if I take this one step further, right? If I've got $1, I know that $1 is worth $1, and I can trade that to any store that I take it to, because everyone looks at $1 and says that's 100 cents, right? But how do we actually get the value of an NFT? Where does it derive its value? Does someone just make up the price and say this is what it's valued at and that's what it is worth? Like the dollar is backed up by something behind it, and crypto, it sounds like it as well. Is NFT in a similar space? How is that created? What is the driving force for it?
So you've got, I guess NFTs they've expanded in terms of what they actually are. So you've got everything from, a famous artist like Damien Hirst, for example, or someone like Beeple, who's probably one of the most famous kind of like Web3 artists who we've all heard of. So like they'd have, if they create a piece of digital artwork, it would be valued, I guess, in a similar way to how you'd value a traditional piece of artwork that goes on auction at Sotheby's. Whereas, at the other end of the spectrum, you've kind of got these generative 10,000 piece NFT collection like Bored Apes, for example. And they're much harder to value, because then the only valuation comes from the supply and demand balance within the market. And that's kind of what's going to drive the price. I think where we've seen it change, certainly over the last couple of years, is that there's been a lot of the early NFTs. They were basically just, a lot of them were just kind of cute cartoon JPEGs. And then it's evolved, and now there's this concept called, where people talk about utility. So like, what can I do with this NFT?
Yeah, and Ben, sorry, keep going.
No.
I was just going to say, just like, tying it back to Shufl and the Shufl marketplace. We read that you developed some of your own tech. How was your experience with developing that tech?
So that was really interesting. Like, it kind of evolved quite naturally, because we wanted to do another collection, and then part of that was, this idea, I guess we're talking about utility. So what can I do with my NFT? So we had this first collection, and it was like, if you had one of those, then we'd allow you to kind of create a new NFT from the second collection. So we needed to build some technology that would allow people to do kind of these various actions with their NFTs.
Yeah.
So that kind of led to us doing it. And in the process, it was like, okay, actually, we've kind of got the basics here of a marketplace. So part of this idea was, how do we kind of create like more sustainable revenue streams? Because part of the initial unlock with NFTs is when they're traded and sold through like secondary sales, the original creator would get like a royalty. So each time someone sells one, like maybe 5 creator. And there's a lot of talk like, this isn't really a sustainable way to drive income for a project over the longer term. So we're like, okay, what could we do where we'd actually, reinvest some of the funds we've made, build something that's going to provide lasting value. So we thought, if we have this marketplace and people are trading them, we've built a platform, people are using it, it's providing real value. and through that we can capture some platform fees, which would provide kind of income back to us, kind of as a business.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess, you know, you've had like so much experience starting businesses. I guess for everyone listening, like if they can see a gap in the market but don't know where to start, what would be some advice you would give those listeners?
In terms of if they don't know where to start, I'd say just jump in, have a go, and just go as hard as you can.
Yeah.
I think once you do start in business, you know, I think certainly, you know, like when I entered like the blockchain space, was a lot of people, you know, I'd followed on Twitter, and like there were these huge accounts and like big personalities, and then
Yeah.
over time you realize like they're just pretty normal people like yourselves, and everyone's just winging it. Especially in a emerging technology like crypto, like it's kind of evolving very quickly. So, you know, the experts of today have probably only been doing it for a few years anyway. So yeah, I'd say like jump in, have a go, and you'll, you know, figure it out as you go along, and just be comfortable putting yourself out there. And it's okay to get stuff wrong, right? I think that's a big part of the learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think you're in an interesting space where, and you've actually like expressed it out loud as well, like you're actually in the process of discovering how best to leverage this technology. It's, you know, it's brand spanking new. There's all these different use cases. What's the experience of kind of going into something that's a blank slate and you're kind of learning on the job?
I think on one hand it can be kind of daunting, but it's also pretty exciting as well, right? Like you get to try these new things, and I think one of the good things is like that feedback's pretty quick as well. Like in terms of you put something out there, you can put something out and it either does well or it doesn't, and you get that almost instant feedback. I think it's definitely had its challenges, like, you know, we're kind of building, and you've got this group of, you know, people who've kind of bought your NFTs, or so you've got these people who are kind of essentially invested in your success. So you've kind of got, you know, you imagine if you run a company and you've got, I don't know, you had shareholders or investors, you've got people to answer to. But when you've suddenly got, you know, a group of like 1,000 people, all with an opinion, who are quite happy to like voice that on, you know, online as well, that's definitely kind of can make it challenging as well. So you've got to be quite thick-skinned. But yeah, it's been good fun.
How have you, I guess, how do you make your decisions? Obviously, there's a lot of voices and a lot of opinions. But I guess at the end of the day, how do you decide which direction you're going?
I guess, well, hopefully you've got good people around you. You can bounce ideas off and get opinions. But at the end of the day, you've kind of got to trust your instincts and hope you're right, and just kind of change along the way. Like I've definitely haven't made right decisions all the way through, and there's plenty of stuff I do differently if I could go back, but that's just part of the process, right? You can't change it, and you just got to keep learning as you go, and hopefully keep growing.
A few remaining questions for me. I love asking this of anyone who starts their own business. What kind of key critical advice would you give to yourself if you could go back to earlier days and give any advice to them to help them manage the process of creating a company more painlessly? What kind of key takeaways would you give them?
What would I do? I think looking back, like there's definitely a lot of things that we did right. And a lot of that initial success was down to a lot of the things we did, but it was also understanding that some of it was down to like the timing, the market that we were in, and kind of certainly within crypto, like, you know, is very cyclic. So like you have these huge run ups, and then it's kind of the market can turn, and it can be a really hard place to work. And I think we probably, looking back, certainly weren't prepared for like that kind of downturn. And it was kind of, I think we kind of drunk the Kool-Aid to an extent and got caught up in it, and you think the good times are going to last forever. And looking back, there was, opportunities early on where we had, outside support, like people wanted to come in and like some investors were interested and we're like, no, we're good. We don't, and actually looking back, it's like, well, that was probably a mistake and we should have taken that and might have set us up and it would have made riding out those, the following couple of years a little bit easier, but that's just part of it.
I understand where you're coming from the perspective of, certain things happen that either put us ahead or behind. But can you think of any like key advice that you would give yourself?
I think the biggest advice is, and I don't want to say it flippantly, but like, don't take it too seriously. Like,
I like that.
I like that
a lot.
too.
I mean, like, I think, like, yeah, like I was like, the first 6 months were like manic, like just worked flat out, lived and breathed there. And like, kind of came like at the end, it was kind of like, I was just fried. And, every decision, it felt like it was like the most important thing in the world.
Yeah.
And you're like just so caught up in it. You're so emotionally invested in it. And I think being able to like step back and go, do you know what? Like this, it doesn't, I don't know. I look back now and you realize like how you've grown in terms of like stuff happens now that like a couple of years ago I'd have freaked out about. And now you're just like, oh yeah, cool. Okay, right. Whatever,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can kind of shrug it off just because I guess your tolerance for like dealing with different things changes and your belief in yourself changes. And it's like, yeah, you grow in that sense.
I love that.
So
And I
I
guess
think,
like,
don't get too stressed out about it. Like,
yeah, and just to, I guess, be able to adapt as well. What you touched on, like that's really important advice.
Yeah, I think you've got to remain open to change and just keep learning and and I mean, who knows, like, yeah, I've got no idea where we'll be in a couple of years and what we'll be doing, but yeah, that's part of the journey, right? And you've just got to enjoy the process.
You almost took my next question, like by answering that, being so entrenched in the space, I was going to ask any predictions for the next 12 months, but it sounds like, who knows?
Well, in terms of kind of like crypto and blockchain in general, or
More yourself, where you see your technology and your kind of businesses go in the next 12 months?
I've been doing kind of a lot of work kind of like behind the scenes certainly over the last 12 months, where we're looking like the initial Goanna collection we created, kind of like how we sort of build that IP out kind of outside of the crypto space and kind of take that more broadly. So like things that we can, and things that we can do with the tree fund, whether that's kind of like through like video games, TV, books, like other things. And that's been really interesting, kind of leaning into that a lot more. So that's something that I think would be great for us to keep going. And hopefully some of those things will start to kind of come to fruition as well.
Interesting. And my final question for you, Ben, is the tech advanced enough right now for you to go into these directions, or are you still kind of waiting for things to kind of develop to kind of go down these paths you want?
Well, I guess like the interesting thing there is we're almost going back into like so that's kind of like stepping back into like more traditional like Web2 or like like traditional kind of like spaces, in terms of like TV media, like those types of things. They're not necessarily so closely related to the kind of blockchain side.
Okay.
So yeah.
And yeah, just to wrap up, Ben, we always ask our guests the same ending question. So over your lifetime in business, what has been one piece of tech or software that stood out to you the most?
Cool. So yeah, I thought this one was coming. I guess like with my background, my bread and butter was always kind of like the like Adobe Creative Suite, so Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign.
Yeah.
So that's probably where I've spent like most of my, of all the different software I've used, that's probably like the biggest one. And then I was thinking, in terms of what we've done on the NFT side, like the biggest unlock there in a lot of ways, like that was a lot of that. And that all came through, artists they were all exclusively working in like Procreate. And I think, for us on this show, I think it's a really nice company to shout out because they came out of Tasmania. So like they're a really big kind of Australian success story.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if you're not familiar with it. It's kind of like art drawing software that works on iPads and tablets. So people are drawing straight on the screen with like an Apple Pen or stylus. So that's a really great piece of tech. I'd love to say I was the one using it, but I'm not kind of my artistic talents aren't there. So yeah, I think they'd probably be like the best answers. And then obviously like the chain that we launched on Algorand, I think is a really exciting piece of kind of blockchain technology as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just lastly, where can our listeners find you and Shufl?
So the best place is probably on Twitter. Like majority of like the crypto stuff kind of certainly goes out through Twitter. So kind of our Twitter accounts there. And they can also find me personally on LinkedIn as well.
And what are those Twitter handles for everyone who wants to look you up?
So the biggest ones probably are NFT projects. So that's AL_Goanna. And then you've got Shufl Labs and Shufl's SHUFL, which is kind of like our parent company, which owns all of the NFT project, the marketplace, and the charity as well.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah, I feel like you've not only educated us, but our audience on kind of crypto and NFT. But yeah, it's been really interesting to just hear from you as a business owner. Absolutely. Kind of just jumping in, not taking things too seriously, but pivoting when you need to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really thank you for the chat today.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I think it's quite daunting, like having to try and explain, some of this technology because when you kind of live and breathe it, you kind of understand it. And I can't remember where I heard it, but like to be able to explain it like simply and understandably kind of like shows your knowledge of it. And sometimes it's not always the easiest thing, but thank you.
It shows you're extremely knowledgeable because you explain it really well.
Absolutely.
I'm definitely leaving this conversation significantly more informed than I was before I came into it.
Cool. Well, no, thank you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to jump on and chat with you all.
Absolute pleasure, Ben. Absolute pleasure, Ben. Appreciate it, mate.
Thanks for tuning in to The Tech Panel. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. A huge thank you to our major sponsor, SmoothLink Integrations. Stay connected and keep up with all the latest in tech.